Welcome to Simmons Says, where I help emerging and struggling writers create intriguing plots and compelling characters to make their stories hard to put down and even harder to forget. A body on the floor isn't a mystery, it's just a corpse. I know, crude, but hey, that's the reality of it. The mystery actually begins when you ask one question: why? Or maybe another way of looking at it might be what happened or who. What is this leading to? A little myriad number of little questions in there, but the basic question is why? See, too many writers tend to think of the crime once, and we've done that, we've set up the crime, but they tend to think of the victim as okay, that's the person who gets shot, or that's the person who gets robbed, or that's the person who gets blackmailed, and the cool stuff is the criminal and blah 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 blah. They think of them sort of like furniture, and someone dies and the detective shows up and the story begins. That's a way of looking at it, but it's not the most practical. It's not the most efficient. It's often not the most effective. I don't think that's really how a true, authentic mystery works. The victim is often the most important character in the entire story, even when they're dead at the beginning. Case in point, look at Knives Out. The film starts with a dead man. And part of the mystery is not just who did it, but why and how, so forth and so on. So, in our last episode, we looked at thinking like the criminal. Well, today, we're going to be looking at the person that the criminal chose. So, let's get started. Let's reconnect with the overall mm, mystery mechanic philosophy. I mean, you already know that, what the crime is, what crime occurred, how it happened, why it happened, who committed it, those elements. All right. So now you need to ask yourself, who had to suffer for this crime to work? Um, I mean, that's where the victim comes in. That's how that decision is made. You don't start by inventing a random victim. Yes, you can do that, but we're talking about effective methods. Yes, at times someone might think, "Oh, it'd be cool if somebody got this, or this happened to them, or this was stolen." And that's a little germ of an idea. But then you want to do the work. And so why was the victim chosen? Remember, we always start with the crime, but once the crime exists, it starts choosing the people that are going to be involved, the victim, the villain, the sleuth, the suspects, the red herrings, all of that. So again, let's look at the person that the crime happened to. Why this victim? I mean, really, why them instead of someone else? Maybe because, okay, let's run off possible list. They knew too much. They possessed something of value. They stood in somebody's way. They represented power, possibly a weakness, like they might tell something. All right. Maybe they work for one gang and another gang's coming in and taking over. They were mistaken for somebody else. All of these are possibilities. Then there's the larger point. Okay. The victim, in this case, a murder case, in this case, the victim doesn't just simply, okay, they're dead. That's it. In figuring out why they were chosen, we discover things about their life. Who were they? What did they do? Who was involved in their lives? How important were they in this position or that position? To whom? So now the victim becomes a more integral part of the story, and possibly even the motives and other things are going to come from that. So, once again, thinking about your victim as less than furniture is not the way to go. Think of them as an integral part of the tale. So let's look at three types of victims. All right. There's the central victim. The entire mystery revolves around them. Their life, their relationships, the secrets they might have, their enemies, everything that we learn about the story points back to this individual. They do become the nucleus, And that's sort of like classic detective fiction. The detective finds out more about the victim, which leads to the motives, which leads to who has the strongest motives, and so on. So that's one, the central victim. Now, you want to get a little more tricky. There's the symbolic victim. The killer chose this person because they represent something, a politician, a celebrity, or an activist or an attorney or a community leader. Whatever it is, this person has been targeted because their death will generate a reaction, either in a community, a household, a city, a country, whatever, right? And there'll be fear and there'll be outrage and there'll be instant media coverage or instant combined attention maximized because this person was murdered or these people were murdered if it's more than one victim. So the victim becomes the message. I've taken out this politician because this is my view or because they are for such and such. All right. So that's two. You've got the central victim and you got the symbolic victim. Then you got the bait. Okay. This one is like they've chosen this person because in killing this individual, it's going to cause a chain reaction that's going to bring out someone else, right? If I kill this detective, if I kill this hero, if I kill this witness or this target, this other person is going to be pulled in, and that's who I'm really after. So you strike here in order to lure your real target into your snare. And that's, again, how the villain might be thinking, and that's how they choose this particular victim. So that's the bait. Then you've got the wrong victim, wrong place, wrong time. Okay. And this is a useful category because sometimes you can have the criminal intended to kill one person, but they got the other one. They went into the wrong apartment. They blew up the wrong car. A case of mistaken identity. Maybe the victim looked like the person they were really after. And so part of the mystery is why was this person killed? When they find out that it was because this person looked this way, well, wait a minute, this person resembles so and so. And this is the detective going on this trail to find all that to maybe get to the intended target before it's too late. Right. So that's a possibility for the line of investigation. Then you have the necessary victim. Well, you might say, well, gee, aren't all of them necessary? Yeah, in order to propel the story forward, yes, they are in terms of a murder case or whatever. But this person has to die because they knew too much, right? The accountant for the mob, the secretary because her boss such and such, or the servant, who again knows too much and subsequently has to go. These are, again, targets. They're not bait, and maybe they're not even central, but they are definitely, I got to bump this person off because of the threat they represent to whomever. So those are your victims right there. And just to recount it, it's the central victim, the symbolic victim, the bait, and the wrong victim, and the necessary victim. So that gives you some nice little possibilities to choose from, depending on what kind of story you're doing. So now let's move on to this next section here. Even after the victim is gone, they're still influencing everything. Yeah, they're part of the motivation for the investigation, but we can learn things about them. And again, in learning things about them, perhaps that leads us to the criminal. But, so the investigator, whether it's a police officer, a private detective, someone who's innocently accused or, is wrongly accused of the crime and so forth, they've got to hunt to find things that are going to help them discover who did it. So they might be going through journals, emails, photographs, finances, friendships, family relationships, statements that were made, anything that they can find that they piece together to learn more, to learn what they need to know in order to solve the mystery. So the victim's backstory, the life they lived prior to becomes important. They're not props. They're not furniture. They are an important piece of an elaborate puzzle that When you place them correctly, when you form them correctly, and you utilize them correctly, adds depth to your mystery, adds depth to your story. Right. So don't waste your victim, even if it's a short story and we're only going to learn a little bit about them. Even the hint and promise of there was so much more heightens the curiosity, maybe heightens the stakes involved in your short story. And so we're like even more satisfied with the end of it because we're like, wow, we didn't learn this, this, and this, but just imagine what that person had been like had they not been, so forth and so on. So you give your audience something to take away that's almost like a little bit of a bonus. So you challenge the audience. Okay, let's talk about that for a moment. Think about it this way. If you want to make sure that your victim really sits in there well and is an important piece of the puzzle, ask yourself, what if I took them out? What if not bumped them off? What if I removed them from the story or changed them? Would the mystery still work? If the answer is yes, then great, you got it. You got the right victim, you got your villain, you got your crime set up, you're in good shape, right? Also, then you can start to figure out your suspect list, the motives, the clues, whatever emotional stakes are involved, and you can actually build towards a much better ending because you know where you're going and you know what you have to work with. If anybody could be lying on that floor, on that carpet, in the middle of the street, wherever it is you bumped them off, if it doesn't matter that it was this person, then you need to ask yourself, okay, what was this about? How come it's not working? Or how come this character is not as integral to the story or utilized in a way that gives me the maximum effect? And then fix it. And again, depending on your stories, there's different ways of approaching that, and we can talk about that another time. So, in closing, because I try not to take up too much of your time because I want you to be up to writing away. Before you write another mystery, don't just create the body that's going to get bumped off, all right? Create that living human being, that living individual, so that the life is missed when it's gone. And subsequently, that powers the investigation. Who loved them? Who disliked them? Who was dependent on them? Who was afraid of them? If that fits in, uh, perhaps, the bigger question is, why was this the only person that the criminal chose to strike? And yes, if you have a serial killer, you have a multiple killings, even unfortunately, if you have a large number of victims, you can focus on maybe two or three of them to create some sort of pattern. When the climax of the story hits and the resolution is playing out, it all makes sense. Okay. You've already designed the crime, you've begun building the criminal, now you've discovered why the victim matters. So the next time we meet, you'll move into the next piece of the puzzle because committing the crime is only half the battle. Getting away with it is an entirely different thing. And by the way, if you need to dig deeper into your victim, suspect, villain, that sort of thing, step into the character interrogation room. That's an app of mine, Write the Crime app, designed to help you discover the motives, the secrets, the contradictions that make the characters matter. Hey, no, I know you're thinking AI, but no, the app will not write this for you, but it will help you through a series of questions. Ask better questions about your character so that your character rings more authentically. Click the link below and give it a try.